Why providing continued support does not work for all games? Nobody's fucking asking for that. The video game industry is committed to consistently providing players with high quality interactive gaming experiences and recognizes the passion and community that grows around its games. Friendly reminder, by the way, that this statement was written by Video Games Europe, the same organization that is paid off by the likes of Ubisoft, EA, Microsoft, Activision, Take-Two. I just want you to keep that in mind before you read anything that might accidentally make you believe that they have the consumer's best interest in mind. Unlike a book or a film, an online video game is not a static work. Online video games are interactive entertainment that combines numerous elements of artistic and intellectual creation with software programming and server infrastructure. This entire paragraph has a whole lot of non-statements. Yeah, my copy of Hannah Montana's Spotlight World Tour is also an interactive piece of work that combines numerous elements of artistic and intellectual creation with software programming. Doesn't mean that I can't play it after it's no longer being sold. I mean, board games are interactive entertainment. Card games are interactive entertainments. That doesn't mean that my pack of Uno gets taken away from me if the publisher no longer wants to support it because there aren't enough people playing it. Realistically, the only part of this whole paragraph that actually matters is the part about server infrastructure, which also happens to be the one side of online games that is entirely a manufactured problem. The right to decide how, when, and for how long to make an online video game service available to players is vital in justifying the cost and fostering of continued technical innovation. I'll get back to this point at a later time in the video because it's complete bullshit. As rights holders and economic entities, video game companies must remain free to decide when an online game is no longer commercially viable and to end continued server support for that game. Nobody is asking you to keep the servers up forever. Man, it sure is easy to make yourself sound like the reasonable person in a discussion when you're arguing against straw mans. Buddy, if you want to shut down the servers, then fucking do it. We don't care. The only thing we care about is playing the game that we rightfully paid for. This is not a difficult concept to understand. When people buy something, they expect to own it indefinitely. The moment we exchange money, you, as the publisher, shouldn't have a saying on whether or not I played the game that I paid money for. If you're disclosing the fact that this is a service with a set duration, whether it's a subscription service or a live service experience with an expiration date, that's one thing. But the moment I start reading the words buy and purchase, you completely lost me. All video games, whether digital or physical copies, are licensed. Oh really? Thank you for clarifying that. I never would have thought. By the way, do you also know that water is wet? The consumer does not acquire ownership of that video game. Now this part of the statement I found to be incredibly sneaky. You see, it is true that we do not own the games that we buy, but when they say ownership, they're specifically referring to the IP as an intellectual property of the video games. They're not referring to the consumer's property rights, which is a separate subject. Despite what these greedy scumbags might say, just because they own the IP does not mean that they have the right to barge into your apartment and take away your physical copies. They sold you a license, and that license comes attached with property rights for the consumers. You see, the problem that we're experiencing now in this new digital era of distribution is that property rights for consumers in general doesn't address unfair contracts between the publisher and the consumers when the ability to access that media that they bought the license to is dependent on the publisher's servers. And it's this lack of clarity, or just downright negligence if you ask me, that has allowed the current abuse that these publishers engage in. So every time someone tells you you're not buying the game, you're buying a license, always remember, we've always been buying licenses for decades, maybe even centuries, for a multitude of medias. We were just more protected back then because those licenses were distributed in physical, tangible goods that the publishers had little to no power to take it back from you, no matter how much they scream, "But my IP rights." Regardless of the current landscape, that doesn't mean that the current practices are okay. Just because the market changes doesn't mean that those changes are good or healthy, and they 100% need to be addressed legally. It is not clear what the initiators of the Stop Killing Games petition seek to achieve as a legal change. I think it's pretty clear if you ask me. You can pretend like you don't understand, but we all know exactly what they're asking for. Online video games are complex operations. They offer interactive features that are supported by a multitude of servers, enabling functionality of ever-increasing complexity. By the way, I'm just going to tell you guys right now, while I do agree that a lot of games use client-server models and they definitely do have some dependencies with the internet, people like Pirate Software and now the Video Games Europe greatly exaggerate how much these games rely on the internet. many of these live service games do a lot of its operations on the client side. You're not installing dozens if not hundreds of gigabytes of data and consuming an unoptimized amount of your hardware resources just as a decoration. Much of the functionality is largely client-sided. Now granted, a lot of the game's logic is server-sided and it's certainly not easy to patch that out, especially for large MMOs, that I will concede and say that designing an offline mode might legit be a lost cause for those scenarios. But at the end of the day, we're not talking about Microsoft Azure levels of cloud integration. A lot of these games could definitely work offline if they really wanted to, but the problem is that they don't. And they create more and more dependencies to their servers, which renders those games pretty much impossible to work offline, which is why I like to call this a manufactured problem. Here are the ways in which players and companies would be affected. Number 1, reduced or no player protection. Requiring games to run on private servers would result in an inability for game companies to continue to protect players from illegal or harmful content or conduct, as the moderation and player safety teams would no longer be involved. In particular, cheating could become rampant without proper enforcement. Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you ask anyone, if they had to pick between dealing with cheaters and having the game completely inoperable, they would rather deal with cheaters every now and then. Also, the entire concept of private servers is that these are isolated, non-public lobbies. If you want to avoid cheaters, you just simply don't invite them. I mean, how do you think the likes of Hololive managed to have entire multi-stream events with games like Rust, Minecraft, GTA 5, and Rust and GTA 5 in specific are both games that have their fair share of cheating problems? They're able to do that because they created their own private servers. They can't get cheaters if they're unable to access them in the first place because it's invite only. Now of course, it's possible your IP and server keys might be leaked or packet sniffed, so it's not completely foolproof, but it's definitely doable. Now as for the whole protect players from illegal or harmful content or conduct, while I understand this argument to some extent, at the same time, you have to remember something. Publishers that enable private servers would be playing the role of passive providers, which are exempt from some of the responsibilities and duties laid out in the Digital Service Act and also Section 230 of the US Congress. So unless the publishers have some involvement in hosting the private servers beyond just giving you the tools to host them, then this argument is kind of irrelevant. Increased security risks. Releasing game code or server binaries to facilitate the creation of private servers operated by players could expose game companies and also the consumers to bad actors, malware, data breaches, and DDoS attacks. Yeah, that seems more like a skill issue if you ask me. The worst part is that I don't even disbelieve them, because even in the current landscape, I would argue that a lot of video games have grossly insecure and vulnerable code. So they probably are right when they say that distributing some of the game code and server binaries, this would probably result in people quickly finding exploits in their code. But if that's the case, then you just simply need to write better code. I mean, there's plenty of open source software that provides self-hosting solutions and have things such as security taken into high consideration. It's not my problem if you can't figure out how to solve these problems. You're a billion-dollar industry. Write better code, hire better security experts for all I care. That shouldn't be an excuse to steal people's games. Or better yet, just make a fucking offline mode and you don't have to worry about these issues. Impact on companies. Number 3, significant engineering and architectural challenges. Allowing players to run private servers would present significant engineering and architectural challenges for many games, due to the way in which such online features are integrated with other proprietary systems and services required for the game. Creating a private server compatible version would be a prohibitive cost, in some cases years or decades after the game's initial release, when only a small audience remains. Yes, prohibitive costs. Man, those indie games that let you host your own servers, they must have a fucking infinite money glitch. How do they obtain resources to achieve such an engineering, architectural, prohibitively costly? Yeah, it's bullshit. This is complete fucking bullshit. Here's what they actually meant to say. We don't want to do more work than we already do. There you go. Simple translation. Negative impact on investment in games, jobs, growth, and consumer choice. Many of the costs that game companies would incur in implementing an end-of-life plan would have to be incurred towards the end of the commercial's life of the game, when it is no longer commercially viable to continue support. Requirements to implement such plans could lead to less risk-taking, fewer investment projects in developing new games, and potentially fewer jobs. Ultimately, it could lead to increased costs for consumers and less choice. We're already getting increased costs, you fucking assholes! Also, could lead to less risk-taking, fewer investment projects in developing new games, and potential fewer jobs. Explain to me why that is my fucking problem. I'm not your stakeholder. I don't give a fuck how this will impact your business avenues. If you want me to care about business strategies, you hire me. As a consumer, I'm the one who's paying you, and it's not my fucking job to care about the financial viability of your business strategies. Keep that shit to yourself. You're a multi-billion-dollar industry. Have some fucking self-awareness. Reputational harm. Allowing players to run private servers with online interaction possibilities could result in players using those games in ways that don't align with the game company's brand values, leading to a negative association with the brand, thereby harming its reputation. I don't care. Okay. Alright? I don't care. That's not my problem. I bought your game. I expect to play it indefinitely. Your public reputation is none of my fucking concern. Impact on intellectual properties. Yeah, I'm just going to skip this entire segment. TLDR, every single thing mentioned here is not something that should be of the concern to the consumer. Our role is to just simply purchase the license to play the game. That's it. However way the publisher sorts out the right distributions between other IP holders or how much of their intellectual rights they choose to lease is none of our concern, and it's entirely up to the negotiations handled within themselves. If they're unable to settle any middle ground, then either don't release the game, or a simple solution, make the game playable offline. You can design the game from the ground up to have some functionalities offline. Like, I understand if you're concerned about existing online-only games having to be patched to be playable offline. That is completely understandable. But if a law were to come out of this entire initiative, it wouldn't be retroactive. So from the very beginning, from the very start of the production process, you can think about offline mode as a concept. It doesn't even have to be as future rich. Even just having one boring, stripped down offline mode where you play with bots would be more than good enough. If you do that, literally every single fucking concern that you're having right now would be null and void. Consumers are informed that their access to online games and associated services may terminate and are informed with sufficient notice in case where that does happen. Yeah, I'm giving you a notice and I'm about to barge into your apartment and steal every single copy of your PS4 collection of physical discs that we're no longer selling. That doesn't make it okay to do it. Transparency. Players must be given reasonable prior notice before any termination of access to the game. How about you put an expiration date on your game? If you're so hell-bent on calling these live service games, then act like an actual service. Tell us exactly when the game stops working every time you sell your game. Oh, what's that? You don't want to? So you want to have the authoritative benefits of services, but not the actual responsibilities to the consumers tied to it? Okay, gotcha. Reimbursement. The Digital Consents Directive provides consumers with price reduction and reimbursement rights in certain circumstances, but also with repair and replacement rights if a game service fails to achieve conformity with certain required warranties. Okay. Will you refund every single game that you disable their ability to be accessed and played? Will all of the owners of the crew get their money back, or even just a partial refund? Maybe a little bit of a repair? No? Nothing? Okay, gotcha. Service duration. EU legislation requires that the service aspects of online video games be provided for a reasonable amount of time, taking into account all relevant factors. It would be disproportionate for a specific duration to be imposed, as this would need to be valid of all types of services, not just games. Yes, the reasonable duration of 2 weeks from Concord. Or better yet, this might be my favorite one, Love Live School Idol Festival 2 Miracle Live. That announced the global release date as well as the cancellation date, which would be 3 months later, all in the same tweet. Yes, very fucking reasonable. You know, I will give credit to Concord, at least they refunded their users. Hell, I'll even be nice to this Love Live game. They announced the expiration date, so you were definitely informed. You were definitely way more informed than most live service games out there. Can we expect all other live service games to provide a refund once they shut down their games? No. Can we get a set billing cycle date or duration for when we can expect the service to end? No. So, we should care about your soap opera drama with your fucking IPs and business strategies or whatever the fuck, but you're not gonna care about existing consumer rights that even you're quoting? That's how it is? Okay, gotcha. Fair terms. Fuck off.